So, like Joe had mentioned, 42 years, and it seems we have the same questions every year about the upfront. And now, we seemingly, in theory, have better tools to figure out where it's going. But that always reveals even more questions. So I went to, who else? ChatBTT. Because, you know, when it comes to this stuff, you might as well cover all bases. But as I found out, you know, there wasn't really that much there. So when I asked what kind of pricing increases and volumes will be TV's upfront advertising market this year, the response was, I don't have any access to real-time market data, and even if I did, I cannot predict the future with any certainty. That's my attitude, it's not it. Then went on. That being said, upfront advertising market trends are generally analyzed by industry experts and market research firms. Okay, great, but still kind of ho-hum. And measurement issues. Traditional methods of measuring TV advertising performance are becoming increasingly inadequate. Okay, we know that. One of the primary reasons for this is the rise of digital media, which had led to a fragmentation of audiences across multiple platforms and devices. Yada, 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 yada. And what about streaming TV? How much money we put into CTV during this upfront ad market? Again, not much of an answer. It's possible that more dollars will be allocated to streaming platforms as they grow in popularity. Okay, geez. Anyway, at this point, I'd like to invite up my panelists. So if you can make your way, that would be good. All right, here we are. And the reason is because it's real. It's real, not artificial intelligence. Where am I going to sit? I'm going to sit there. Okay. All right. There you go.
Yes. No, Mike's going to sit.
Okay.
Mike over here. I'm here. Sit right here. Okay. Oh no, you're good. Where's Dave?
Wow. Chess pieces all on the line here.
I'm on the end.
There you go.
You know what? Just have a seat. I got it all good.
Isn't this great? This is.
The idea is y'all are supposed to know who's sitting where.
There you go. There you go.
We're going to do musical chairs later.
And like I prefaced, real people talking about real analysis. That's what we like, from real professionals. So here's some more, at least to referring to the market research stuff. Some data from our fine friend Ed Pazian of Media Dynamics. 5 broadcast networks a year ago, so $9.9 billion worth of ad time, estimated, up from 6.4% the year before. Cable channels were at $10.2 billion, an increase of 5.2%. Total $20.1 billion, up around 6%. eMarketer says U.S. connected TV advertising spend will exceed $26 billion this year. It expects CTV to be 50% of the size of linear TV by next year. Now, what part goes to premium streaming platforms owned by legacy media? They didn't say. Anyway, we're going to try to do better here, and I'm going to have my panelists introduce themselves as I get ready, starting with Maureen.
Hi, I'm Maureen Bosetti. I'm the Chief Partnerships Officer at Initiative.
Hi, I am not Dave Campanelli. I'm Mike O'Connor from Horizon Media.
I'm Mike Fisher from GroupM, where I lead the investment innovation team.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Sederbaum, and I oversee video investment at Dentsu.
Okay. We on? Yeah, there we go. That's good. I hear myself now. Okay, one of the big questions we want to ask, and I'm going to get right to it right now, because if it leads, it leads. Next year, September 2024, in theory, as far as we're told, there's going to be no Nielsen NTI, no C3, no C7. Good luck. How do you feel about that? How do you handle everything, guarantees? But more importantly, to Joe's point, what kind of changes can we be starting this year for this upfront in preparation of next year? Maureen, you want to go first?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right.
Microphone is
Yeah,
spotty.
yeah.
Okay, well, if Nielsen releases, if they
Yeah, okay.
change.
I did preface that.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
well,
yeah.
it's a big if. I would say this year is really about, obviously we need to review the data, right, in terms of the scalability of it, the audience size, the panel, the transparency, the methodology. There's a lot for us to still learn in the next 18 months. We also have to operationalize it. How is it getting ingested into our system? How are we tagging everything? Because it's a new process that has to happen with
Right.
Nielsen or VideoAmp or iSpot, whatever currency we choose to use in a year and a half. So there's a lot for us to understand and review, again, when it comes to methodology and the data. But again, more importantly, how do we price it? How do we operationalize it? How do we make sure we can post on it and track it in real time? So we have a lot to do in the next year and a half to get to September of 2024, but this will be an important, very important year ahead of us to get to that point.
Got it.
Yeah, and I think as we think about it, there's a lot of conversation about alternative media, but I think to your point, Nielsen One is happening, so it's really it's an evolution of media, and you know, however you slice it, whether it starts, you know, September of 24, there will be a different currency because, you know, the traditional panel-based currency will not be there. So I think it's critical, and I think it's a great opportunity that we explore alternatives in general and look at all the companies that are out there. I mean, I know certainly within my career, it's the first time that you've actually had a chance to assess things and have a real alternative. So I think everything Maureen said is dead on, and this is the year that you actually have to start looking at things for real and testing and you know, taking it from there.
Yeah, as Maureen said, there's more nuance that goes into just simply flipping a switch and moving away from an established currency. There are planning tools that all of us are probably using similar tools, and then all of us are using proprietary tools that need to be able to ingest not just one new currency, but all new currencies. There needs to be a normalization factor to be able to bring whatever Paramount decides to do as their primary together with NBCU's primary, because my clients don't want to have to look at 3 or 4 different sets of reporting to know if they're reaching the right people. It also changes how we, across the board, not just through investment, all of us on stage, but how our planning teams engage with the market as well, and how our clients need to engage with us. In today's world, we're planning one audience. It's a demo-based audience. It's one currency. It's a time-based currency that everybody, that is the same. In the new world, you know, our clients are going to need to understand that there's a new way to be planning, buying, measuring that they're going to need to get on board with alongside us. One of the One of the things that we're talking about, I just took a breath. One of the things we're talking about when we have our pre-upfront conversations with clients is, you know, their willingness and acceptance of trying new things and breaking out of what their market mix modeling tools are telling them, because those are the things that are 3 or 4 years lagging. MMM tools today don't capture the unbelievable shift to time-based streaming and day-partless prime time that we've seen in the last 2 years, and our client, you know, we're going on a journey with our clients for this.
Right.
Yeah, and what I was going to jump in is exactly right. It's the clients have to adapt to their business as well about what information they're ingesting in to make sure that we're proving out all the results that we're talking about. And what I think is important to point out too is that there are 2 separate but related conversations when it comes to this topic. It's measurement and it's currency. And they're both obviously related, but they are separate to some degree. We have to figure out how to count all the marbles, but then we have to figure out how to transact it, how to operationalize it, how to make sure that we can actually prove out what we're doing. So there's 2 conversations that are related from my perspective. And I also wholeheartedly agree that we know change is coming, whether or not it's September or not, TBD on that fact. But what can we do this year to create some of that muscle memory, some of that operational structure to learn how are we going to operate in this world? And the last thing I'll point out is, and I know all of us on this stage agree and have done this work as well, we have been transacting on strategic audiences for a while now, right? So it is new in the sense of changing an overall perspective from a demographic landscape and the general rate of change conversation that we're always involved in at this time of year. But we have been transacting on a strategic audience that many of our planning tools, we're planning on it, we're spitting it out, and we're going into the marketplace. talking about it. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think that we have to do it, no pun intended, a measured approach to measurement and currency, that we should be doing some capacity for those clients that are leaning in and willing to be a little bit messy for right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make an unbelievably important point that I want to echo, that a lot of times all of us in this room are people say, oh, we're not moving fast enough. Oh, another year of no change. We've done this all. We're there. We've been transacting on these alternative currencies. We're going to be in an upfront where the majority of what we're all doing is measured on a new standard and on a new audience and on new currencies. Whether or not it's billed on and transacted on this year or next year does not mean that we're not pushing things forward at the speed that we should be.
Totally. Couldn't agree more.
To build on your point there about, two different currencies and measurements, if you go to NBCU, if you go to Paramount, how comfortable are they with the fact you can be using multiple measurements, multiple currencies from multiple different media suppliers?
Look, it's our job, of all of us on stage and the panelists here coming after us, to take the same data that we all get back. We all get back the same level of granular reporting from measurement vendors, from currency vendors, and from networks themselves. It's my job as GroupM, it's somebody else's job at another agency, to provide a unique spin on how we help our clients do their jobs better using that data. So it's nothing different than what we've already seen. There's different standards in measurement inside of walled gardens. There's different standards in measurement inside of different channels. We're all experts in putting that together and generating business results for our clients.
And I think to an extent, a lot of them are already doing it because we're doing a lot of data-driven linear video, and we are already using different currencies to measure some of that. So especially with like a Paramount or an NBC, it's already happening, albeit in smaller chunks probably than it needs to happen in the future. But I think they're already pretty comfortable with it in a way, and now we're trying to scale it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with what Maureen just said. And the networks are pushing that story, right? So they want to use their internal optimizers to find their audience within their silos so we can keep more money there, right? So they have been talking about this. So it's not unique to this year. It's getting a lot more publicized attention, rightly so.
Right.
But it's not in general a brand new concept. It just adds a wrinkle that the legacy way of doing things, if that goes away completely, then it's all new. But it's not that we haven't been doing new things consistently and pushing the marketplace forward to, evolutionize, proper grammar, the upfront legacy practices.
Right. Mike, how comfortable are your clients knowing that those long-term base prices that they get from the networks could be going away, or could be, that solid footing they've had for years? We've heard about some of the consumer product companies like P&G and Unilever for years have had this very low base, and other companies too, what is their concern like now for next year?
Well, I think that's part of the key in understanding how these currencies relate to each other in some way. We know there's different methodologies. I heard someone say recently that you don't go to the supermarket and buy your produce with euros and your dollar your meat with dollars, which I thought was an interesting take. But the fact is, you can do that, and the world operates on different currencies. You just have to understand how those currencies actually relate to one another. I can assure you that the network groups understand how these things work in relation to each other, because they need to price their media. They need to understand how much they have to sell. So I think over the next year, looking at, and I would imagine all of us have been doing this over the past year as well, but looking at how the different measurement platforms actually relate to each other. So I think that's a big piece of it. Obviously, there are clients that are concerned. I spend a lot of my time in performance media, where if you think about the DR marketplace, there are no guarantees. I think that's an area where if you're talking about counting impressions, there's a lot of room for disruption in terms of how you look and measure things, especially as we think about proprietary tools that we're using, as our source of truth more than we are looking at a network guarantee, and really that's a way to hold people accountable. It's not necessarily how we're optimizing in real time.
Yeah, I think that, real quick, I just think that that analogy is exactly right and exactly what I meant about the difference between measurement and currency. For those clients that we represent, we need to establish a baseline and still get the advantages that they've had for years. Otherwise, we're just giving away what we've created for the last couple decades.
And you
I'm
can
not
do
willing
that.
to do it.
And you
And I
can-
don't think our clients would allow us
And
to
you
do it.
and you can do that.
Yeah, I don't think that a shift to more transparent and more accountable and more audience-first ad models is going to result in higher costs for the client. It's going to reduce waste. Impressions, when viewed on a sheet of paper, it may look like it costs more to reach that strategic audience, but we've accounted for that as we've been doing data-driven linear for the last 5 years. We know that, yes, we're paying for strategic audience reach, but we're still talking about linear TV. We're still talking about one-to-many. There's a whole bunch of people outside of that key singular audience that are being reached. And when a client and when we do those analyses to normalize the total reach back down to a base price, we get there.
Oh, okay. And so we'll all be doing the upfront deals in Bitcoin maybe in the future? That would be good?
We'll let Mr. Konevsky tackle that in a couple minutes about the five-year
Okay.
plan.
What kind of negotiations and analysis do you do with those measurement companies out there, especially the ones that the legacy media companies have aligned themselves with, whether it's an iSpot, a VideoAmp, or whoever, a ComScore? How do you address and look at them going forward this year and next year?
I mean, look, networks, sellers are not moving to new currencies out of the goodness of their heart to benefit me and us and our clients. They believe that, they're looking at measurement vendors that they believe are going to more accurately calculate and capture who's viewing their content, and they believe it's going to create more efficiencies for them. We believe it's going to create more efficiencies for us. I think one of the things that we're going to look for this year is evaluating, making sure and working with the networks as well, because it is two-sided, but to make sure that, we understand that if a network wants to use a certain currency provider, they can't be making that choice because it benefits them. We need to know that accurately is capturing a better view of the holistic ecosystem.
I think we're looking at a few things. One is personification. Can we get to real people, not just households?
Yep.
Is it fair and representative of the entire United States?
Sure.
Are they fully transparent in what they're doing? Can we operationalize it? It's not just a static report that we're getting, as we've seen with some partners. That's not helpful.
Right.
So there's a myriad of things that we're looking at. And then how does it compare? I think nobody wants to compare it. I think you have to compare it.
Yeah.
You have to. There's a baseline. We've had a baseline for,
To what? From
well,
what?
Nielsen. I mean,
Just
we have a
Nielsen.
baseline.
But you don't compare it to
We're not necessarily
ComScore to iSpot or...
I mean, you can, but I think we do have a baseline, so I think we have to have a comparison to some extent, understanding that's a little bit of apples and oranges. I do think what the Joint Industry Committee is doing is important to create the standardization that they're trying to get to, so that what iSpot is doing is not completely different than video. I think that's important, because so that we're all on the same page with creating standards in the industry.
Right.
So I think that that is sort of seeing which partners are now rising to the top in terms of being able to check a lot of those boxes. But I think what the JIC is doing is important to get us to, again, who are those leading partners that are really fulfilling all the standards that they have in their RFI.
Mike, yeah.
I also think competition is a good thing, right? And there hasn't been a lot of competition for Nielsen in the past. I think it helps all the various partners. We talk about efficiency, that can help efficiency in a different way in terms of cost. So I think that is a key piece as well.
I just think that all the points are so valid, and it just shows that we keep adding to the pie of complexity, and that is the reason why we just need to be careful about the rush to change. We know that change is coming, and it doesn't mean that you're putting your head in the sand because you're not doing everything at once. But these things need to mature, they need to scale, and they need to do it in the right way, because there's too much money at stake to make a rushed decision. So I think We do need to take those baby steps for those clients that are recognizing that it's not perfect just yet. Improvements keep happening, but to Maureen's point, where are you starting with if all of these partners keep saying, oh, here is revision 2.0, that's great because they're making progress to make it better, but where am I starting with? So it just shows that they're not fully ready yet, and again, it does not mean that we're not going to test those waters with some actual skin in the game to make sure that we're both accountable, both sides of the house. But it still has to be done in a careful way because it's too important to get wrong. Sure. And as we all know from representing our clients' money, if you spend it wrong and say, oh shit, they didn't measure this, I didn't realize that, it's not a good thing. Right. And the last thing I'll say is, though, it is really what Maureen touched upon too, is for some of the smaller D&I partners, better measurement is going to be better representational, and we all need that, and it's good for everybody. So there are so many advantages that we'll see. It's just going to take a little time to get there. But I think that we're all obviously willing to do it. We spent the first 30% of the panel talking about it for a reason.
Sure. I want to remind everyone, if you have questions, think about them, and we'll get to them right away. You can ask them right now. Anyone just off the top of your head, anything? Okay, Joe Mandisi. There you go.
Hang on, Joe.
So I love what you're all saying, and I think this is why we have a demand-side panel and don't have buyers on it, because what we discovered in the past is there's a debate that goes on between when you have buyers and sellers on the same panel. So my question is, for the last few months leading up to this, the sell side has been controlling the narrative on the new currencies, right? And I felt like it was kind of a bum's rush, right? And it was very sobering to hear Maureen and all of you say you care about methodology and comps and things like that. But I also hear you say, you're supporting the JIC. It is not a JIC. It is a sell-side committee that is certifying currencies. In a true JIC, the industry would get together and create a currency and source it out as an RFP. So what we have is a series of currencies being certified by your sellers, and you're going to vet them and decide, how you use them. But my concern is, are we going to get into a game of Babel, where you're all probably too young to remember when Arbitron and Nielsen competed in local TV, or when Simmons and MRI competed in magazines. What are you going to do when there's multiple currencies going on simultaneously? You're not even haggling off of the same common denominator. So my question for you is, why has the demand side capitulated on currency?
So I don't agree with you that the JIC is a sell-side initiative. I think the fact that OpenAP is leading the JIC is conflating OpenAP and their role as a sell-side vendor with the JIC. The buy side is equally represented in the JIC. It is not meant to establish a currency. It is meant to establish, at least in GroupM's opinion, it's meant to establish a minimum standard that both the buy and sell side should be willing to accept, at least in year one, of what we believe new, better quality, more accountable, transparent measurement can be for the ecosystem. As far as we're as JIC members, we don't have any expectation that we're going to walk out of the JIC having blessed a specific vendor or a currency. In fact, the whole purpose of this is not to bless a specific vendor or currency or methodology. It's to make clear to the marketplace what we as buyers and sellers want out of currencies long term and what we're willing to accept from them.
And the only thing I would add, and I agree wholeheartedly, is just because the sell side might be the most vocal doesn't mean that they're controlling the narrative, and it's not something that we are talking about on a daily basis internally. I just might not be in the press about it. So they might be more vocal about the need for change, and you can argue and debate about what is the reason for why you make certain public statements or not, but it doesn't mean, as we all can attest, I believe, that we are having these daily conversations with all of our clients and all of our internal teams about what's right, and I don't believe as the buyers that we will be told to do anything if we don't believe in it.
Yeah, I don't know what we've capitulated at this point, but I totally agree. I think we're part of the conversation. And I think what tends to happen last year and this year is there's a huge buildup of conversation around currency. And then as you think about operationalizing, like, wow.
It's so hard.
It is, when it comes down to actual negotiations, I mean, there will be movement, but it's the majority of what will be transacted on is Nielsen legacy currency.
That was part of it where a report came out that Nielsen says they don't want to participate in the JIC because they believe they're citing the fact that they don't want panel-based data. Of course, that hasn't been decided yet. That hasn't been decided yet anyway.
Right, but the problem is that this is now being litigated in the trades and in press and through letters when our belief is that Nielsen and the JIC should sit down and have a conversation around what we're actually trying to get out of it. So there isn't this misconception of what the expectations are.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions yet? Oh, there's one way back there, I think. If you can just
And
identify
remind us
who you are.
when you're ready to speak, who you are, and
Yes.
then your question. Did I see a hand up back?
I thought it was a hand back there. Maybe not. Okay. A couple of years ago, I think it was A&E right here on the stage talked about how they were going to do some guarantees based on business outcomes, which was a very ambitious approach. I don't know exactly the success rate. That now seems to be sort of far afoot for most people. While it's important and an ultimate goal, it seems very complicated. According to a media plan, it's not just one network. People get their sources from, as Dave and I were talking about, many different varieties. To get attribution clearly from one or not. But going forward, what are your clients saying about those specific things that they like to see when it comes to business outcomes, either guarantees or measurement, whether people coming to their website or going to their store? Where does that sit these days? Anyone want to handle that?
Go ahead, you're in the performance.
I think business outcome guarantees are extremely challenging. They are something that does happen. We do deals on business outcome guarantees. I think they're few and far between. I think from a performance basis, again, I don't know that we necessarily need a performance guarantee. We're measuring performance on an ongoing basis. Again, if you kind of go to the kind of the more direct response or world where you have more fluid media dollars, you're not locked into anything. So if performance isn't tracking to where you need it to be, you make optimizations, and that is often a great leverage with networks or platforms in terms of how you can improve performance, and either whether that's price or transparency.
I mean, media's contribution to sales is what? In some cases, 5%, 5-10%, depending on the category, right? So to say that a network is going to drive business outcomes is a very risky proposition for someone to take on, especially in complex categories. Yeah. Maybe if you're selling pizza, it's easier because you can see how many pizzas you sell. Right. But in a lot of categories, it's very complex, and media's contributions to sales is actually a small percentage. Yeah. Not that it's not valuable. Obviously, we're all here because it's important, and we drive a lot of sales. But there's a lot of complexity to how they drive sales. So our focus is more about measuring it over holistically. So seeing all the parts together and how they work together to drive a client's business versus like having to guarantee a partner. So, I mean, that being said, we're obviously doing it where it makes sense and certainly more in digital. It's more accountable in digital versus linear. But, just to put it in perspective, I think to Mike's point, it's few and far between, I would say, on the linear side, just because we're trying to look at it more holistically.
Yeah, and to use the phrase again, networks are going to look out for themselves and not do this out of the goodness of their hearts. If a network is willing to provide our clients with business outcome guarantees, there's something in it for them. But more importantly, our clients are going to have to give up, and us as agencies and planning and investment teams are going to have to give up control of what we're buying. We're not going to be able to go to a network, tell them we're buying the type of content, the type of supply, the type of reach that we're used to buying and then have them say, oh, we'll guarantee that. They're going to want to do their own internal optimizations and better understand the type of supply that they think is going to drive the best outcome, which means that my clients need to give up control. And that's not something that we're on board with yet.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add is simply that business outcomes are ultimately what we're all trying to accomplish anyway. It just is a matter of if we're going to transact in the marketplace. And to Maureen's point, it could be critically important, but it's challenging if you're only looking at one particular network and what is the actual contribution. It doesn't mean that we are not doing it. It doesn't mean that we're involved in the conversation. We worked with A&E a couple of years ago on some of those. We're also pushing attention, but all of those things factor into what are all the holistic channels contributing to the ultimate goal of your marketing objective for client X. And sometimes it's more challenging than others to do the actual transactional guarantee within the market.
Again, I'll open it up for questions. Oh, right.
We've got one right here in
Got
the
one
back.
there, and then the one over here, up here.
Now that I'm here, Maureen, Maureen, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit because I was going to quote a similar number. So if media is 5%, let's call it 8% of sales, what percentage is measurement of sales? And are we just chasing or trying to boil an ocean for absolutely no reason?
Thank God Jason's
And
not on this panel.
that's Jason from Havas, if you don't recognize him back here.
It's a good question, if what's measured.
Well, Jason, it's a fact. Oh, sorry, Maureen, it was towards you. I have to respond because he used to be my boss. But I feel like I always need to respond every time he sends me a text message. But it's an interesting question because I think that I was having a dialogue with someone who says, well, if I run 8 commercials and I sell this many sandwiches, depending on how you count the impressions delivered in those commercials, if I'm still selling those many sandwiches, does it matter? I think it does still. I think that we need to still understand the right metrics to measure what our exposure levels are. So I don't think that you can say we're boiling the ocean for no reason, because it still helps feed into the models to make the decisions in advance of even putting those placements out there.
We had a question right here.
Hi, I'm Jared, and I'm from Modern Impact. When you said that media only attributes to 5% of sales, or the gentleman in the back said 5 to 8%, does that just mean linear, or is that all digital? And
And again, it depends on the category. It could be anywhere from 5 to 15%. So I just want to, I didn't say 5.
50 or 15?
15. It could vary. It varies, right? Again, based on the category, it's the complexity of the business. So we've seen variations of what the actual media contribution is to sales, right? But that can absolutely vary by category, and that's overall media's contribution. But it can be a wide variation, again, based on the client.
Okay, thank you. So I find it a challenge when we're measuring some of our linear or connected TV, we're measuring an online traffic lift, which typically is more than 5% of sales. But I was just curious if linear was
That's what I mean. It could
different.
be totally, that could vary very much based on the category. We've seen some clients where it's, again, 5, 8%. It's, so we just want to be cognizant of the fact that we're not expecting media to do all the heavy lifting in business.
So I want to drill down a little bit to linear TV here, in terms of what remains for linear TV. And a lot of people have made a lot of analysis when it comes to live content, live sports, live news. How do you evaluate linear TV in that regard, with those emphasis that people want to make in live content?
Yeah, I feel like we're going back to remember that conversation we used to have about, is it content, is it audiences? Yeah. I feel like we're almost back to that in some ways, because it's like there's certainly really good content that still lives on linear. Sports being the dominant one. News, I think as we're heading into 2024, while it's not, there's certainly valuable audiences, and I think we're going to see news becoming more important. There's certainly some entertainment that's valuable. So there's this idea that there's good content clients want to be a part of. There's going to be some big events coming up. We got the Olympics, NBC, SNL 50. There's big events coming.
Right.
And then the rest of it is I just want to extend my reach and find audiences. So I think that there's still going to be that idea that clients want to be in some of that content, but as we have more technology and other ways to buy audiences, I think you're going to start to see a shift into, hey, how do I just find my audience wherever they are? And so I feel like this could be a year where we see a much bigger shift in that direction.
Yeah, and listen, I totally agree, and I think that just because linear TV still works. For any of the clients that I talk to that still advertise on linear television, they see results, it's effective for them, it's efficient for them. It has to be right-sized in the capacity of what we spent 10 years ago because of the reach implications. But I agree with Maureen completely that sometimes you're balancing those live event sport tentpole strategy with that immediacy of giant reach and marrying that with a strategic precision reach against a specific audience regardless of what they're watching. Because I also still believe, personally, that a lot of us are very busy, and whatever we choose to watch is premium to us. So it is not my job to then dictate, well, this is a premium program, you have to do it because it's airing in prime time. If you choose to watch program X and you only have 20 minutes in your day, that is the most premium. So if I care about Maureen, I want to target Maureen regardless of what she's watching it or where she's watching it. And then you kind of marry that approach with the sports and tentpoles and prestigious giant reach events. It's kind of like...
Yeah, and sports are a great story, right? I mean, it's one piece of linear television that's doing tremendously. If you look at like NFL ratings year over year, but even if we looked back 5 years, and NFL ratings are essentially flat from 5 years ago, where broadcast prime, cable down about 50%, you know, when looking at different demos. So I think it's about sports is a great story. And then also, I think probably as you lean into other day parts and into cable, you know, you're starting to get where, you know, reach is smaller, and the world where we scrutinize things on a kind of a network by network level based on the content might be changing to some degree, where you do need to focus more on the audiences that you're reaching within those networks and not get hung up on things that we may have 10 years ago in terms of I need my top tier cable networks. And I think that's the beauty of the marketplace right now is there are a lot of there's a lot of opportunity. There's not necessarily a lot of demand coming. So I think it creates a lot of opportunities for buyers this year. And I think it's incumbent on us to educate our clients on those changes in the landscape, but also take advantage of the opportunity that we have this year on a lot of different fronts, whether that's, you know, currency and measurement, but also changing what we're buying, how we're buying.
I was just going to make a joke that we should just end the panel on that statement, but I totally agree.
And yet Netflix doesn't really want to get into live programming. You know, they did the Chris Rock comedy special, and
I think they will.
And they did Love Is Blind, and it has a little bit of a, you know, but you know they seem to want to go into carefully where, you know, Peacock, Paramount Plus. You know, well, they have NFL, right? So, I mean, they kind of want to think, let's do everything.
I agree with Maureen. I think that they will. In fairness to them, they've had an advertising-supported product for 6 months, right? And they've already done 2 events, and they were giant, meaning giant in terms of what they were trying to accomplish. So that's a product that just needs to mature.
You think that they go slowly like that is probably, you know, there's no rush for them, you know, because they have an audience built and a business model that works.
Also, they have to find the right opportunity and what is the right thing for them to say, this is the live event that we're going to try to do. And now, after what happened with Love Is Blind, which I didn't watch, but I heard it was a little bit of a challenge, I think that they want to make sure that they get it right. So I don't work for Netflix, but I think that I'll respect that they still need to grow and learn as a brand new endeavor for them as an organization.
While we're on the subject of Netflix, how do you think they're doing with their ad-supported model? The reason why, because they're the big streamer in the room, really, that everyone always thought that should have been doing advertising support, and they're there now. What they said, 95% of the available programming that they sign to can be made available via the ad-supported option. Is that something of strong interest among your clients, or not really?
I mean, I'm very bullish on Netflix's long-term role in the ad-supported ecosystem. Absolutely, I think that one of the things that everybody needs to realize is that penetration of Netflix mirrors penetration of linear TV at this point. I think the latest stat I saw was that 65% of Netflix households also consider themselves moderate to heavy linear TV viewers, and 80% of moderate to heavy linear TV viewers also subscribe to and watch Netflix. We should be treating Netflix like any other cable or broadcaster cable conglomerate, an NBC, a Warner, Discovery, a Paramount, a Netflix. Like, that's the level of penetration they have. On the flip side, if you're looking for true unduplicated linear streaming reach off of a linear plan, I think the last stat I saw was Pluto has a 10% overlap with linear TV. That's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. Because if I have a linear heavy plan and I'm looking for incremental reach, the free ad-supported streaming channels, Tubi, Pluto, that's where I go for reach incrementality. If I go to Netflix, I'm looking for broad, mass, linear TV-like reach. So these are the things we need to start to think about as we start to do converged video planning across linear and digital, not simply thinking, oh, because it's happening on a Roku or an Apple TV device, it's incremental to linear. So long-term, like, Netflix has its place among the broadcaster and cable media owners.
Does the same go for Roku and Amazon? I mean, all the, any other places where there's a lot of...
Yeah, I mean, it varies as well. You know, Roku's ad experience with Roku Channel is more of a fast, free ad-supported streaming type, which lends itself better to people who don't have a linear TV channel package they could turn on and have something going right away. Amazon skews more towards that premium pull model. People sit down on their couch, grab the remote, they search for a specific piece of content they're going to watch, similar to how they consume premium linear TV, primetime quality content.
I mean, I would agree with, I think long term, I'm bullish on Netflix. I think we spend a lot of time talking about Netflix right now for a platform that we think is probably from an ad-supported perspective, in about, has 1 million subscribers or so.
Right.
I think they've taken a lot of heat in terms of their launch, which I thought was, unwarranted. I think they were very transparent with advertisers in terms of the scale that they would have and the obstacles that they'd have in terms of going to an ad-supported model. And I think, to your point with Pluto, we spend a lot of time talking about something like Netflix that has massive reach, but from an ad-supported perspective does not. Whereas platforms like Tubi and Pluto have, tons of reach compared to these, what we think of as the streaming giants. And I think it's important, again, when we think of it from a marketing perspective, to look at the opportunities where there are ad-supported viewers. And I think when you do that, you start to see kind of a different playing field versus what you hear about in the news or the trades.
And they all contribute. I think that all of us obviously recognize the growth and importance of CTV from a consumer perspective, from a viewership perspective, and what we want to ultimately buy from an inventory perspective. And just like we wouldn't single out only NBCU versus Disney versus Paramount, I think they all have a role, and you have to identify who your audience is, what you're trying to accomplish, how can you find that next most efficient incremental reach point, and include them all. We don't live in a world any longer where there are any must-buys out there from what
More opportunity.
Exactly right. And what we were talking about from going into this marketplace is that I believe that there will be less pressure on us to rush into decision-making, because with less money in the market, you can be more choiceful about where you're trying to find your viewers. And because of the fragmentation we see overall, there are less and less must-buys. Yes, NFL is absolutely dominant, but it's really expensive. And I have clients that can't only run an NFL because they also care about their market sales.
And there's a lot of it.
Correct. So, I think it's just, we need to recognize, and I think we do, that an overall holistic approach, not one size fits all, is where we're going. And again, linear television plays a role in that, I believe. It's not 95% of my plan like it was 10 years ago, but 50% of my plan is still pretty impactful. And then I can figure out what do I want to layer on CTV? How do I want to use the digital nature of that property to extend? How do I want to use digital video? And then social video. And how do I want to combine that with what I'm doing in local? So it all makes your head spin, but it's interesting.
Again, one more time for questions.
They're right here. They're right here and available. Okay, scatter market. And what can I say? What we talking, what the analysts have been talking about for a couple of months, possible recession. You just alluded to it a little bit, of being selective. How important is second quarter scatter, let's say, for example, as a predictor of where the upfront's going? And just overall, where do you see, especially the fourth quarter, are your clients making plans to spend more or less money in the upfront due to, possible, of a dip in the economy?
I'll start,
nice big
and
question.
we can go down. I mean, it's a complicated one, and
Sorry
I
about
only
that.
pretend to be an economist, but I think that there's enough uncertainty out there that has led to the softening of the scatter marketplace. And regardless of what second quarter is, and regardless of what the narrative will be portrayed as, oh, second quarter's heating up, it's not. I think that the last couple quarters have indicated that we can expect a more muted upfront marketplace. Now, the reality is, we all know who've been doing this a while, that over time, the scatter marketplace trends a lot more expensive than the upfront marketplace. So we can't just bank on that of, oh, well, Dave, I've been able to get anything I want in first quarter at flat pricing, and I'm a CPG, and I usually have efficient pricing, but they'll take it all day long. You can't guarantee that that will happen into the future. And I think for all the benefit, there's a lot of benefits that includes price and so many other areas about why, as a transactional model, the upfront works. But I do believe that there'll be less money in it because of the uncertainty and the CFOs, whether or not they want to release money, because you just don't know enough yet.
I also just think I agree with that. I think the psychology of the market would show, right, that it's going to be a softer scatter release. But I don't think we can now look at history to predict the future. The future is completely different than what it used to be. So it's harder to make future predictions based on the past. History would show, right, softer scatter, softer upfront, stronger scatter next year. But again, I don't think we're in that pattern anymore.
42 years, Brian Weiser says.
I know. It just.
Yeah, right. Maybe not.
But I think in terms of the market, the other thing is it's not just about putting it to the upfront. Clients are moving it to different places.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's going to search, it's going to social, it's going to performance channels. So it's, yes, I think there's a conservativeness in terms of spending, but it's also just coming out of the upfront altogether, because I think they're going to put it into other more performance-based channels. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily spending less overall, but I think it's just shifting. And we don't want to make as many long-term commitments as we used to, because we want to find places to be more flexible with the money. So I think it's not just about being in TV or the upfront. I think there's a lot of factors that go into it.
And to that point, Maureen, CTV, we've all agreed, is super important, but you can buy it programmatically throughout the year too. Exactly. So it's just about, it doesn't mean that you're overall going to spend less, but you might just be spending and committing less right now, because we're getting a lot of pressure to say, I need that rainy day fund to, yes, flexibility is important and my contraction terms are important, but are they enough? And I think that's one area that we at least will be pushing this year about how can we break down some of those legacy handcuffs.
And I think, as Maureen said, the money doesn't always come back into linear or into the upfront. And I think if you think about, especially from a linear perspective, when a lot of money was pushed away a couple of years ago, it's not as though that money sat on the sidelines and we waited for the scatter marketplace. It got redistributed and redeployed. So I do think, as you think about things, you're going to see softer linear demand for sure, and it's for all the reasons we've talked about.
Maureen alluded to this. Should we consider, Mark Pritchard of P&G long lament about the upfront, that just-in-time buying, that buying upfront should be less of a thing going forward. That we should plan and buy more near-term basis, a la most digital platforms.
I don't think that the upfront should go away. I think the upfront needs to evolve in terms of what a connected, more impression, more real-time marketplace looks like. I think there's still an immense amount of value to our clients to be able to understand what they're going to spend and who they're going to spend it with throughout the year. It's just hard. It's become harder for all of us to say, in some cases, 9 to 12 months out from the decisions we're making now, oh, this particular client is going to target this particular audience in this particular content for this particular job to be done. We don't know that yet the way that we used to. There is all sorts of economic and socioeconomic factors that play into that we need to have, as buyers, to have more flexibility. But that doesn't mean that we don't know these are the 4 or 5 media companies that this particular client is going to want to spend the most money with. and use that spend to secure the finite supply in live sports, in tentpole events, in unique sponsorship opportunities, but still have that broader flexibility and fluidity throughout the year to make decisions that are more audience focused and more channel focused.
Mike, is there more flexibility in your clients' wants and needs?
Yeah, I think everybody always talks about more flexibility as something that you want. You want your cake and you want to be able to eat it too. You want to get the benefits of the upfront from a price perspective, but you want 100% flexibility, which, is funny because a lot of digital platforms have been providing that over the years. But I also think there's always going to be an upfront market, and if there ever wasn't, then somebody would say, what do you think about me committing a bunch of money upfront to get a better price? And we see that from, for all the talk of the upfront going away, the people who are probably trying to start the market right now are some of the digital first platforms out there. So we have new fronts now in addition to upfronts. I think the way we buy will change, but there will always be a futures market in terms of I'm willing to commit X to get a benefit in terms of price and flexibility. And to Mike's point, I think what flexibility means doesn't necessarily have to mean the ability to cancel, but to allocate your money, whether that's programmatically or across different verticals within a conglomerate over the course of the year.
Yeah, and you said it perfectly. If you don't know exactly who your audience is, you might want to commit that money, but you don't have to be as prescriptive that it has to land on channel X within your portfolio. I want to give you that money for when I define the audience and provide it to you, and then you can match it. Here is where I will land within your house. So some of those conversations change from where...
Right, and that also requires the networks to update their trafficking systems as well, because when a network closes an upfront deal with a holdco, they're actually going in and booking units in their system so they could better manage yield. There needs to be changes on their end to be able to account for a client who says, I know I'm going to spend at this amount of time in this time period. I just want to have that flexibility to use an audience to dictate when it gets closer.
Okay. Any other questions out there? Yes. We have one more, and then we can wrap this up.
This is Jared from Modern Impact. I have a question. We're in 2024, but out of my curiosity, why do we think Facebook Watch didn't really take off as video investment leaders?
I don't think the idea is wrong, right? Let's look at Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is a media company. Mr. Beast is spending over billions of dollars in revenue and is building production studios. Mr. Beast is a modern media company. That content needs to be distributed everywhere. I would say, if anything, the idea of Facebook Watch could have been a little bit early, but then again, it's in Facebook's walled garden. There needs to be more open, content creators need to be able to distribute content everywhere. Mr. Beast has built his brand entirely on YouTube and is now moving off of YouTube and trying to get followers on TikTok and other social and distribution channels. And it's, to be honest with you, from what I hear and see, it's proving harder than people expect to migrate from one distribution point to another. So I don't think the idea of digital distribution first, premium short form, micro creators, I think that's the future for a lot of the viewers that we're going to want to be targeting in the next 3 to 5 years. It's just how the platform provides data and monetization tools for creators that's really going to resonate.
Okay, that's all the time we have. Give these people a nice standing ovation so they